The Supreme Court is hearing arguments today on a sex discrimination lawsuit against Walmart. More than 1 million current and former female employees could be involved in a suit, making it the largest sex discrimination case in U.S. history. The case was originally filed in 2001 by a group of women who said their male co-workers received bigger salaries and better promotions. If these employees win, Walmart would be forced to pay billions.
The number of African Americans in D.C. is shrinking, and for the first time in more than 50 years, they may lose their majority status. Census data released Thursday shows the black population fell more than 11% over the last decade, barely retaining its majority in 2010. But statistics show an increase in non-Hispanic whites by more than a third compared to a decade earlier. Officials say the shift is the result of soaring house prices and an influx of 20,000 new residents over the past 10 years.
And more census data shows the Hispanic population in the United States is booming, and that could cause a big impact on politics and social services. Yesenia Alfaro is live in the studio to break down the numbers. Yesenia?
Thank you, Jeremiah. According to the U.S. Census, the Hispanic population has now reached 50 million in the United States. Hispanics are now the largest minority group. But what does this all mean? Experts and students at American University weighed in. Let's take a look.
Between the year 2000 and 2010, the Hispanic population grew 43% and accounts for 56% of the nation's growth, according to the Pew Hispanic Center. Experts say the rising Hispanic population could be a challenge to the education system and social services in the future.
They are the aging population in our population. So as far as education is concerned, yes ma'am, not only is education, but government services are also a matter of concern, and elections. Again, you're having this population that is increasing, which our leaders are going to have to be focusing on and providing services for.
Some of the states with the biggest growth in the Hispanic population are Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Dakota, and Tennessee. At American University, Professor Hirschberg says the metropolitan area will see major changes in demographics.
I think, like the rest of the country, Washington, D.C. is going to become, or not just Washington, D.C., but this metropolitan area is likely to become more diverse. It will be the case that this is a country where whites will be non-Hispanic whites will no longer be a majority.
Hispanics are not the only minority group growing in numbers. The African American population is up by 12%, and the Asian population grew 43% like the Hispanic population. As for the total U.S. population for 2010, Asians make up just under 5%, African Americans 12.5%, and Hispanics 16%.
I think that it'll certainly have an influence regarding the government's policies with the immigration community, as well as issues of migrant labor, worker rights, etc. So certainly I hope it starts like a new narrative for the country.
According to the census data, the increase in the Hispanic population is a high result of high birth rates, not immigration. Jeremiah, back to you.
Thanks, Yesenia, for that report.
The 2010 Pakistan floods left over 20 million people homeless and close to 2,000 people dead. The United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called this the worst natural disaster he had ever seen. Yet aid to Pakistan was much lower as compared to natural disasters in other countries. George Washington University hosted a fundraiser for the flood victims. Students and audience members talked about the lack of aid for the 2010 floods.
I would blame the media, that the coverage wasn't that great, that people didn't know about it, the awareness wasn't there. The people were just like, whatever.
Haiti's a lot closer, and the other thing is we're not fighting in Haiti right now.
Because we don't have a good reputation in the world.
But there's so many bad things going on in Pakistan that this is just like another addition to the list.
The night was filled with food, music, and fundraising. Participants raised more than $1,500 for flood victims.
Graduation is around the corner for many students at American University. Today, students preparing for commencement met with university departments to have their questions answered about the May 7th graduation. Photographers were on hand to shoot photographs, and participants received a free print as well as other prizes that were given out throughout the day.
Coming up after the break, DC fills in the holes. The DC program, Pothole Palooza, wants to fill in more than 6,000 potholes this year. A full report after the break.
Things are looking pretty good right now, but winter's not done with this just yet. Find out if it'll affect your morning commute. Coming up, I'll break down today's weather report and this week's 5-day forecast.